Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, is there anyone prouder of Jim Harbaugh right now than Mahmoud Ahmadinejad?
I was gonna say Jack Harbaugh, but no. I think we've topped the list of the former president of Iran.
For those who do not remember, this is actually a callback to a bonus episode and a Christmas episode like 2 years ago.
Oh, dude, was it not in an actual episode?
I believe it made it into a Christmas. I don't remember. It was one or the other, but it definitely appeared in a Christmas episode where there was a tweet out there where the former president of Iran was asked about the University of Michigan's football team, and Jim Harbaugh specifically. And there is a large Iranian population in the greater Michigan area. So not totally out of place, I guess, but maybe you can provide more context.
Well, I mean, there is. I mean, there's just generally a large Persian and Arab population, like in Michigan, enough that the Department of Homeland Security very helpfully decided to open up one of its 3 national offices in Dearborn, Michigan. But yeah, there is. So the original tweet was from Ahmadinejad. The NFL season will start this week. Unfortunately, once again, Kaepernick is not on an NFL roster. That's how it started, of course, even though he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And someone responded with, "Dear Mahmoud, we have much bigger problems here. Hashtag Michigan is 8-8 in its last 16 games under Coach Jim for UM. Hashtag Go Blue. Also, college football is the only authentic football. Cordially, Fred." And then he responds with a hard work ethic. Inshallah, the U of M will return to its glory days. Which I should point out, like, not a ton of people unfamiliar with Michigan call it U of M, right? Like when I was in Michigan, a bunch of people called it the U of M, and I had to like, he's from Minnesota, right? I had to like reorient myself and be like, oh, they're talking about Michigan. But outside of Michigan, I haven't heard anybody call it U of M, right? So like, he's familiar, right? That's the only.
Yeah, it's the only way that works.
Yeah. By the way, he didn't attend. He went to the Iran University of Science and Technology. He's an engineer.
No, he's not a Michigan man himself.
Yeah, but hey, he killed it.
Well, speaking of Michigan, we have a Lions game to review. The end of the Viking season is finally here, and we will talk all about it. But before we do, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. We've got plenty of stuff to go over. We got the review, we got the mailbag, all of that. But if you feel like supporting us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode, and for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription, you get access to the bonus material, you get access to the Discord, all of that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to give a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of Norse Code merchandise, shirts, baby onesies, all of that is available at norsecode.threadless.com. Also, a quick announcement, as we are out of the playoffs, the Norse Code schedule goes back to about once a weekish during this time of year, and then at the actual like off season for everything, it'll go back to about once every 2 weeks. So we're kind of at our own discretion at the moment for speaking on the playoffs and stuff. As bigger news comes in, it will necessitate an episode, say a Kirk Cousins signing, or say, Justin Jefferson gets a massive Brinks truck, backed up to his home, that sort of thing. Absolutely will demand an episode. But we will be going back to twice, say every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks, very, very, very soon. So with that said, we are going to get into the review of the Lions game itself. And I guess the thing that stood out to me is that it's too bad that we are in the quarterback situation, or were in the quarterback situation that we were, But even so, Justin Jefferson got 1,000 yards in 9 games. The man deserves his money.
He's incredible. It's insane. So 3 receivers who met, Pro Football References minimum games threshold. I believe it's games for receivers. For like quarterbacks, it's attempts, but instead of targets, it's games for receivers. Only 3 had a 100 yards per game or more. Obviously one of them was Tyreek Hill, right? One of them was oh gosh, I should look this up. But obviously the third one was Justin Jefferson, which is crazy.
CeeDee
right?
Lamb,
like CeeDee Lamb, that's it, yeah. Who barely made my Pro Bowl. This was a crazy year for receivers. But yeah, just like absolutely incredible stuff. And Jefferson's second on that list, by the way. CeeDee Lamb is third. So he ends up with 1,074 in, technically it's like 9 starts, 10 games, because one of these games he didn't start. But also it's fine because he didn't finish one of these games, right? And in the game he didn't finish, he had like 35 or something yards. Crazy. Yeah, absolutely absurd what he was able to do this season. Obviously, he's not going to end up with like postseason awards or anything like that, but hitting 1,000, he ends up on the rare list of receivers who've started off the career with 4 consecutive 1,000 plus yard seasons, which is, and in Vikings history, that's actually fairly rare as well, despite the strong history at receiver they have. Yeah, I mean, he was nuts. He had 15.4 yards per touch, which did not lead the league this year, but his yards per touch the last 2 years did. I don't know. He's a nuts player. He's very good at football, and I expect him to get a deal like $35 million a year or more, at least in terms of the way that like new money and averages work. I'm sure the reporting will say something like 35. The actuality will probably be different. But I mean, yeah, he's a game changer. This is actually his highest yards per game ever, because like last year he's at 106.4 and led the league.
Let's go over the quarterbacks that threw to him this year. Kirk
Why?
Cousins.
Do we need to?
Kirk Cousins. That would make sense.
Yeah, that follows.
Nick Mullins.
Yeah, he's the backup. That makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose. Josh Dobbs a couple times.
That can't be right. He wasn't on the team. He plays for Arizona. They traded for him from the Cleveland Browns. What are you talking about?
I was about to say Sean Mannion, but that's not it either. Like, this is nuts.
Jaren Hall.
Jaren Hall.
So I think it was Kevin Seifert tweeted out that in the 8 full games that Jefferson played, so the first 4 and the last 4 of the year, he ranked first in the NFL in yards in those first 4 games and second in the NFL in yards in the last 4 games. Just absurd, especially given the receiving production. And it's actually kind of nuts that the receiving production in the NFL this year is so crazy, and it's almost certainly top heavy, but the top of that receiving production is so crazy, despite the fact that passing totals, passing numbers, and offensive production are down this year. And if you do it per game, and the receiving totals I'm mentioning are per game. So it is kind of cool to see all these amazing receivers do well, despite the fact that defenses are playing better than they've had in like the past 3-4 years. And Jefferson was certainly part of that. There was a portion of the year where he was averaging like 130. So, there's that. I wonder if he could do that next year. That would be extremely cool.
It's hard to, you listen to people talk about like the best receiver in the league, and this year it's kind of it goes between, the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill. You can get CeeDee Lamb involved. CeeDee Lamb's had a career year. And you have, you can go, West Coast with San Francisco and all that. But, like, Justin Jefferson is very much in the conversation, despite the fact that he was hurt for half of the games this year. Like, the dude is absolutely unreal. And almost willed this team, if not for the defense, into potentially beating the Lions this week.
Yeah. I mean, like, he has the ability to take over games in a way that receivers rarely can, right? Like, Tyreek probably can. Brandon Ayuk kind of can, right? I don't think CeeDee Lamb can in the same way that Justin Jefferson and Tyreek can, right? just the ability to kind of define how that game is going. I mean, 192 receiving yards when you've got Nick Mullins throwing to you, which I guess Nick Mullins does throw for a lot of yardage. It's just kind of there's a couple of picks here and there in between. But like just the ability to just consistently produce. Astounding player.
Yeah, he is going to earn every single penny. he's going to be worth rather every single penny that he gets on this. Let's if we look at his career for a moment, he has 62 catches for 1,073 yards and has scored multiple touchdowns in 8 games against the Lions in his career.
Jesus.
1,073 yards in 8 games. 8.
Yeah, so like his yards per game has been increasing every year, which you typically don't see with like rookie phenoms, which is really cool. The thing that kind of gets me is that he is already past the threshold to be included on the all-time receiving yardage list. Now, obviously, he's not super high on it, but he passed 5,000 yards, which means he ranks 226th in NFL history in career receiving yardage, which is like, it's so cool, like that he passed 5,000 in his first 4 years to end up on the list. He's on a pace faster than Randy Moss, than Terrell Owens, than Larry Fitzgerald. And, if he plays as long as Jerry Rice, he'll beat that guy too. I heard he was pretty good. Now, that one's a pretty big if, granted. That one's kind of a weird one. But, I mean, he's currently on an arc to have one of the greatest receiving careers, if not the greatest receiving career of all time.
Just watching him frustrated on the sidelines at the offense and watching the ball just go through him for a couple of those second half drives was just it gave you something to like enjoy, despite all of the terrible defense the Vikings were putting up because they didn't have anybody out there to play defense. And the other receiver that is worth mentioning is that Jordan Addison, despite stopping on that one run, so the ball, when he was running out to catch, and the ball went over his head as a result in the end zone, the one where he didn't stop was a gorgeous play and a 10th touchdown for the year.
Yeah. Like there's not like a way. Yeah, there's not like a way to like characterize. Like it was gorgeous. Like it was beautiful. Probably his like 10th most impressive play of the year, but it was incredible, right? I don't know. I don't know. It's just like really cool, like just the way that he's got the ability to kind of consistently produce. All right, I was looking up just like most receiving yardage in the first 5 years of somebody's career. So obviously Jefferson has only played essentially 3.5 seasons. And I wanted to see how he stacked up in total receiving yardage over the first 5 years of somebody's career. And he ranks 11th despite having played fewer games than almost anybody in just those first 5 seasons. God, he's incredible.
Yeah, just ridiculous. So Addison was putting up good numbers. Jefferson was putting up good numbers. KJ Osborne was even out there doing something.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the game that he had for Mullins last time, which I think was the game I'm talking about was the Green Bay game, right, where he like caught these crazy contested catches. But it was helpful. It was productive. It was kind of, I don't know that he's washed out all of the kind of annoyances from like the last couple of drops and bad games that he's had over this season, and not like last season was incredible for him either. But having the last couple of games, showcase, relatively high level play, a lot more concentration, the ability to reel in the ball a little bit more often and be kind of available and clutch on third downs. That was nice. That said, I mean, he is still kind of pretty weird about the way that he runs routes, and sometimes it's not very helpful. But yeah, I mean, to have him kind of put in a good performance, like that's kind of one of the frustrating things about this game is that you had, a good performance from Jordan Addison with that incredible touchdown. You had a good performance from Justin Jefferson, obviously. You had a good performance from KJ Osborne. You even had a good performance from, a decent amount of that offensive line. Not all of it, obviously, but a decent amount of that offensive line. Pretty good performance from Ty Chandler. And nothing. Just didn't get. And you even got like good-ish performances from some individuals on defense, all thrown away. All of it thrown away. And the fact that Osborne didn't have that many good games this year, to have one of his good games come in a game where it just kind of got, dumpstered, it sucks.
I don't know. There was a sack that Blake Brandel let through that was just sad. It was just one of those, you shouldn't be in this position at all. I
think that's like one of the things where it's like he's a very good backup tackle and he is a pretty good backup guard, but a good backup guard is a bad starter. And I think that this is that game that kind of demonstrates why. Like, Aleem McNeil is healthy. He had been missing from the Lions roster for quite some time. And he's quite good. So, he was able to do some damage against people like Blake Brandel. But it's like that kind of underscores that fact that, like, okay, well, you've got a good backup guard. That doesn't mean you've got a guy that you want starting there in a bunch of games, or a guy that's going to be available to you if you're up against a really good defensive front. That's what happened, right? That was not great. Brandon Neal revealed today that he'd been playing with like a fractured bone in his foot all game, which would explain why he played so poorly, but he did play poorly. Even Christian Darrisaw got a little bit. But yeah, Brandel was having an awful game. I think out of all of them, he was having the worst game. Brown and Neal was not having a wonderful time either.
Yeah, watching Brandel just get pushed back by Hutchinson was just not inspiring any sort of hope. The last real positive thing I want to mention is Ty Chandler, who was doing quite well in his "I'm just going to get 7 yards every time you give me the ball" routine.
Yeah, it's more of that. That'd be nice. I mean, he's still kind of, so the last 2 games, including this one against the Lions, he's pretty bad in pass protection. So that one game where he was great at it, didn't give us a ton of signal because it's like 7 snaps, right? But I would like to see more of this. It's kind of an interesting thing because when you look at what are the elements that matter most statistically in terms of running backs and their impact on offenses, it's pass protection. That matters more than pass catching. That matters more than running, just in terms of the things that improve your win probability the most and are also the most stable from year to year. That is the thing that kind of sticks out from running back. So, I think a lot of fantasy guys for a long time were really upset when coaches, why did I say upset like that? Anyway, we're really upset when coaches would say that they were going to determine who was the starting running back based off of pass protection. They're like, oh my God, just get a guy who's good at catching the ball. Jesus. The pass protection stuff doesn't matter. And it turns out it actually statistically mattered the most. That's going to be something that's going to be interesting to compare to the fact that Chandler is clearly a much more explosive and capable runner than someone like Alexander Mattison. Since I don't even have to say since the Denver game, because he's only had like 20 carries outside of it. But so he's 100 carries this year, 460 odd yards, carrying for 4.5 yards per attempt versus Alexander Mattison. I mean, and they've been playing. It's not as if, because sometimes you can't compare running backs on the same team in terms of like efficiency or whatever, but they've been running in the same situations because they either traded off every drive or Ty Chandler ended up becoming the starter. It's 4.1. And for a lot of the year, it was like 3.3. The production that Chandler provides, which has that upside of being able to grab you a first down along the way, is just so much better. I don't know that he's a great runner or anything like that. I think the offensive line is very good at run blocking, but he's a lot better. And so I think that there's something there. He could improve in pass protection. There are examples of backs who have not been good in pass protection the first 2 years of their career and have become very good pass protectors. And so, he could join that list of backs, but I'm sure the Vikings will probably invest in a running back or something because you just can't roll with Alexander Mattison as like a significant snap getter.
How many touchdowns did Alexander Mattison have this year?
I want to say
zero.
Yeah, I want to say zero. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, here's the thing. The Vikings only had 7 rushing touchdowns this year, and 3 of them came from Joshua Dobbs.
Zero.
So 3 for Chandler, 3 for Joshua Dobbs, one for Cam Akers. Rip. And that's it. I finished the list.
Ridiculous.
That's the list.
Just, ugh. For a moment, I was trying to remember if CJ Ham had a touchdown this year, and he wasn't really used that much.
No, and I was genuinely and seriously advocating for him seeing the field more often, not as like a meme or as part of the CJ. No, it's like he's a goodish fullback, right? You lost your tight end. So you might as well put the fullback on the field. And also you're bad at running in short yardage. Like get the guy who's good at it in. I don't know, man. I'm going to write a piece that defends Kevin O'Connell for the most part because I think he got a bad rap from a ton of people this year in ways that are kind of unfair. But like that, I think is a fair locus of critique to be like, okay, you really thought
multiple times
that you could. Yeah, you really thought you could just turn Johnny Munt into DJ Hawkinson and just treat the offense like it's the same? No, obviously not. DJ Hawkinson is almost a Pro Bowl quality tight end, or he is a Pro Bowl quality tight end. He's almost an All-Pro quality tight end, right? It's like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and then it might be Hawkinson, right? It's like Mark Andrews, maybe Hawkinson is a better blocker, right? So like he's like right there. You can't just throw Johnny Munt. That's not fair to him. That's not fair to Johnny, right? You can't just like.
You gotta be fair
like,
to
hey,
Johnny.
You gotta be fair to Johnny. You're just throwing him out there, having him do the exact same stuff. Dude, put CJ Ham in the role. You could have CJ Ham do the exact same stuff, and it would have turned out better. You shouldn't, but that would have been better, right? So, like, it would have been nice to see Ham get a couple of goal line carries because clearly the goal line carry deal was not working. I mean, I think 2 of Joshua Dobbs' rushing touchdowns came from 20-plus yards anyway. Like, that's not even a red zone touchdown.
The thing with the CJ Ham usage too was like how many? Remember the 2 tush pushes in a row? Really?
Yeah. They came from the
Ham.
second lightest dude on the offense.
Yeah, throw CJ Ham out there. He's the bowling ball. Just put him there. I realize I'm biased on the whole CJ Ham thing, but it didn't make any damn sense. The whole
he didn't have any rushing first downs.
No.
He had 1 attempt for 7 yards.
Yeah, he was when he came out, like it was. Yeah, I noticed. And anytime he actually like was lined up for blocking, like all right, he's probably gonna be sitting there for blocking. Maybe he'll move into coverage, but like no, it was nothing. No, just he was just there to block every once in a while. You have an option, especially when you're constantly in 3rd and 4th down and like 1 or 2. You can do this. I have faith in you. It's just unfortunate. All right, so the rest of the offense, crap. There's things went okay. It was a Lions game. It was the last game of the year, and everyone was hurt, and the Lions were convinced that they could get the number 2 seed if they kept playing, and that they were not going to get hurt. That didn't last long. That didn't.
Unfortunate for them, yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work out as well. Have they even released what the actual injury was on their tight end? Their very good tight end that's going to be useful?
Yeah. It's up there with actually Hawkinson in terms of quality.
Yeah, exactly.
All I remember is Dan Campbell saying, we could look it up, but all I remember is Dan Campbell saying, like, yeah, well, it's not as bad as we thought, but it's obviously not good, which is like, okay, that's pretty alarming.
Yeah, Laporta. Yeah, it was Laporta that got hurt.
Sam Laporta injured.
Yeah.
Let's see. All we have is encouraging. He has an outside shot to play versus the Rams.
Yeah, I have an outside shot of playing in that game. The man has a sprained MCL, likely. Like that's the best case scenario that he could have.
A sprain is a small tear, and when you when you emphasize the word small, that's pretty good. It's good that it's small.
Yes, it also could be much worse. But, which I mean is encouraging news, fine, but that was incredibly stupid to watch several of their like key players start to go down. Like,
well, so like the thing is, you're not gonna get anything different from Dan Campbell. There's the possibility that if they were locked into the number 1 seed, they would still play their starters.
Luke had a comment that I know we don't like to credit Luke with things, But
Oh, I'm sure whatever he's saying, he's about to steal from me what I said in
probably.
the pre-show for Minnesota Football Party. But go on.
But the line was something along the lines of Luke Braun had said that the same thing that causes the Lions to play their starters right now is the same thing that got them into the playoffs at this point. Dan Campbell's
Oh yeah,
mindset
yeah. He
is
100%
absolutely
he
the
stole
thing.
that from me. So I can just say that this is still Luke is correct because he did a bad thing and he stole a take from somebody.
There you go. You don't do that.
So yeah.
Famously.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, that's exactly like, and the way this is described, like when the first time I'd ever like interacted with this kind of concept, I was talking to Adam Harstead of Football Guys. He's a guy I follow on fantasy football Twitter that I think looks at these problems in really interesting ways. And this is like years ago. I was like, man, Adrian Peterson would just be so good if he didn't fumble, like a normal whatever take. It's like, yeah, obviously a reef, but I just tweeted out like, yeah, he'd be so good if he didn't fumble. Can you imagine, or something along those lines, right? And he responded with, no, you can't imagine it because the way that he plays, the reason he's so good is that he plays such an aggressive style of football that is ingrained into who he is that also causes the fumbles. It's the same reason that he doesn't go out of bounds when you need him to. And it's like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. That makes sense. Like, you don't get this Adrian Peterson running through people, right? Like, as a semi truck through, William Gay, right? Like, he's not doing that if he's also not reckless. Like, the recklessness is who he is, right? Dan Campbell, his like aggressive, put it all on the line. I don't want like meathead sounds like such an insult, and in this case, I don't really mean it as an insult, but like it was really kind of stubborn headed meatheadedness, right? Is part of the reason the Lions have been so good. It's the same reason that you would play your starters if there's a shadow of a chance that you could improve your seed. And it's kind of funny because the process that moves them into the second seed, should all the other dominoes fall, and the process that keeps them at the third seed, their most likely opponent in both scenarios is the Los Angeles Rams, because for all of the other games that have to go the other way, that moves the Rams into position of the seventh seed to play the second seed. Whereas if they lost the second seed and they played the third seed, some of the other stuff that, well, nothing else has to happen because they could lose the game, but against the Vikings, but that does increase the odds that they play the Los Angeles Rams as the sixth seed. So it's kind of funny. They play the same guy and they play the same team at home in either circumstance. It's really what happens in the second round that changes. Potentially, maybe, right? Because we reseed now in the playoffs. So it's kind of funny that it was like a pretty small percentage chance of getting a pretty small percentage chance of an advantage in a future round of the playoffs. But yeah, it's the same deal. And Luke stole that from me, so we don't have to give him credit.
Oh, good. I was worried there for a moment, and perhaps
I understand the worry.
I mean, I can go back and edit it out, but at this point, the cat's already out of the bag. So let's just move on. But
sure,
the few shining points on defense would include Danielle Hunter, who was just harassing.
He did very well.
Yeah, he did very well. I don't know there's much more to really credit on that Vikings defense for the Lions game.
Ivan Pace, for the most part, had a pretty good game. I mean, some of the tackles, he's got a high tackle total, and some of those came downfield a little bit, which isn't great. Harrison Phillips had a pretty good game if you kind of ignore the reason Lions fans are mad at him, which I'm sure you've seen that, James, right?
I don't remember.
So what happened was that after, the play where Amon-Ra St. Brown leaves the field in order to basically like catch his breath because he was injured. So what on the play, on the tackle, after the whistle's blown, when Harrison Phillips gets up, it looks like on video that he's putting his knee, driving his knee into Amon-Ra St. Brown's back.
Yep, I did see that.
Yeah. And it was like, I think it was supposed to be a rib injury, so it's pretty relevant. And it looked like St. Brown complained, not like to an official, but like was complaining in general that Phillips had done that. So it could be that he did put a significant amount of weight. That's what it seems like. I don't know. But if you just kind of move that aside, Harrison Phillips, in my opinion, largely had a pretty good game. That that might be it on defense. Let's see what PFF has to say. Uh, Ivan. Okay, so Ivan Pace, they gave him a better grade than I would have expected. But yeah, the two guys in the green are Ivan Pace and Daniil Hunter. I guess Kairos Tonga is a light green, which sure. They didn't love no, that's Harrison Smith. They were okay with Harrison Phillips. Yeah. So those are probably the three guys that I thought: Ivan Pace, Daniil Hunter, Harrison Phillips. And but yeah, well, let's just pretend PFF is right and say Kairos Tonga is up there too. Um, yeah, that was it. What's interesting is you take a look at these grades. Well, it's not that interesting because it's not hugely surprising. But Joejuan Williams does have a worse grade than a Caleb Evans. Both of them are the bottom two, right? So it's not as if. But yeah, Evans had a god awful game. There's just no getting around that. He was abysmal. Harrison Smith had a bad game, I think, for like the third game in a row, just like Evans, honestly, third game in a row. Um, in fact, Evans's three of his four worst PFF grades um, came in the last 3 weeks, right? So there's just like something interesting about the last 3 weeks, whether it's because Byron Murphy was gone, which the Vikings mostly seem to. I guess I don't really play sides, but it seems like with that defensive setup they would. But it might have increased the level of competition that Evans was up against with Byron Murphy gone. And in that case, that could be a reason why. But yeah, just in general, just bad.
Yeah,
But for most of the season, he was all right.
a better defense would have been able to handle this Lions team no problem. It's also one of the reasons why I wonder if they're going to end up getting killed by the Rams.
Yeah, that Rams team is so difficult to figure out because the offensive line's very young. Everything is really young. They had the most rookies on their team, I think, in NFL history, at least in training camp, and the most rookies on their team. I think to start week one for a long period of time for a non-expansion franchise. They had a ton. They added a bunch through the draft and more through free agency, which is why they've got an offensive rookie of the year candidate. They're not going to beat out CJ Stroud with Puka Nacua, but Nacua is probably second. And then they have my vote for defensive rookie of the year. He's probably not going to win it. Jalen Carter's probably going to win it, but I voted for Kobe Turner to win defensive rookie of the year. Like, they have a lot of rookies. Now the rookies, I pointed out, some of them are playing quite well. Some of them are not. They're playing out of necessity. So I don't know because the Lions don't have as young of a team as the Rams. They've got much more experienced players. People are going to focus a lot on the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff thing, which, sure, fine. Actually, that's a pretty good storyline. We're going to hear a lot about it. It might be kind of sickening by the end of the game, but I think it's kind of interesting in the meantime. But I do think they might have a chance. Not having Sam Laporta is pretty brutal. And I don't know if they'll have Khalif Raymond either because he was hurt on a return, I think. But yeah, I don't know. The Rams team is weird to me because I think they're likely prone to a lot of mistakes.
It seems fun to me that Detroit's first home playoff game and forever, first in that building, could be ended by Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago we would have said the same thing anyway, right? Hey, got him.
Oh, yeah, that. Is there anything else that we can say to wrap up this game? It was other than it seemed like Nick Mullins was really trying to throw that last interception. He was doing his best to not throw the picks, and then they happen one after the other, like in the most predictable possible way.
Yeah, so on our Nick Mullins bingo that we put together for the football party, one of the things that I put on there was like, well, he's going to have a positive EPA game and he's going to look awful. And to me, positive EPA is not just plus EPA. Many quarterbacks can do that, but rather is going to have a better than average EPA. And he's gonna look awful. The thing is, through the first half, he didn't look awful. He didn't look great, right? The Vikings weren't scoring all the points they needed to, but he didn't look awful. And he's on pace to throw for like 400 yards. Nearly did. I think he threw 392 or something like that. And he didn't look awful, and he had like a really good EPA. It was like it's just the fact that Jared Goff was throwing at a 85th percentile EPA or whatever at halftime, which, I mean, that's a product more of the defense than anything. That we weren't getting the kind of Vikings results that we were looking for. And then at the end of the game, you just done enough stuff where it's like, nah, actually, on the whole, he looked pretty bad. Uh, that's bad. That's bad. That throw was bad. You tried to throw a pick there and you didn't. I think he probably had, I would say, definitely 3 turnover worthy plays, but maybe 3.5 because he kept on trying to throw turnovers like behind the line of scrimmage, and it just so happened that there weren't like Lions defenders there, even though there should have been. So it's like that, but like he threw one right into the arms of defensive tackle again off of a sack. It's just all he can't. He's addicted to it. Like once a game, as he's getting sacked, he's just going to fling the ball into a defensive tackle, and it's on them to see if they'll catch it. Once they did, twice they didn't. So I don't know that those are good odds, but that's better than 3 for 3, I guess.
It seemed like, I don't know if you've played much of the way of the old Nintendo game Punch-Out, but each player that you were fighting in Punch-Out, they had this quirk. They had this like special thing. Like if you were able to catch them, this was what they did, and this was how like you got stars. This is how you beat them. That felt like what was happening with Nick Mullins. Like if you get him onto his back foot as he's falling backwards, he's just going to throw the ball. He's not going to hold on to it. He's going to try to avoid the sack. He may get intentional grounding. It may send the Vikings even further back. But like this is absolutely
that's what's happening.
This is absolutely what is happening. This is his thing. T-Jack had that stupid jump pass thing that would drive me nuts where we needed to like nail his feet down to the ground. Christian Ponder would just like not slide and get himself knocked out of games. Teddy was Teddy. Like there were just like things that like certain QBs just do that'll like drive you nuts. And this is one of the worst things that could be done, because every time he tosses that thing out, it seems like, yeah, somebody's going to come down with that maybe 50% of the time. And the fact that it happens multiple times a game means it's going to get taken.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I'm trying to remember. So that was Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so everyone remembers Glass Joe and then obviously Mike Tyson at the end. But there was like a fighter from Miami that was crazy difficult to beat. And then also like a super racist caricature of a Chinese person that was kind of difficult to beat.
There were multiple questionable racial characters in that.
Yeah.
Soda Popinski.
Probably.
Soda Popinski from Russia being one of them. Piston Honda. Yeah. There was the King Hippo from I believe Samoa or the Philippines. I don't remember which.
It's crazy. Well, I mostly remember the Asian guy because it took me forever to beat him because you had to time his like
the Bengali
special move.
Yeah, the Bengali fighter who would do like the snake charm thing around.
Oh yeah, that was super racist.
Yeah,
I remember that guy. I was actually on a flight to Bangladesh because they had the little games on the back of it. I was like, wait a second.
So my son likes playing that game on the Switch, and I had to give like a brief explanation. It's on the Switch. It's on the Switch and the NES things because they have like a ton of old NES and Super Nintendo and 64 and Genesis games. But like on here and like Game Boy and Game Boy Color, all that. And I had to like sit him down and be like, look, there's some stuff in, like I had to give the disclaimer that you see in the beginning of like an old Muppets TV show. Where I was like, look, there's going to be some stuff said in here that you're just going to need to ignore. This was a product of a different time. Like Soda Popinski, the Russian, saying he can't drive right now, so he's just gonna walk all over you. Yeah, let's just ignore that for a moment. And yeah, but the point being is that he's just got this one thing that like he does as a character, and it drives you nuts. And this is how you beat him.
Yeah,
unfortunate. Well, this is the end of the Vikings season. It was a season of it could have been something different. It was a season of, man, if only. And
yeah, I think so, except the defensive collapse in the final couple of weeks kind of nudges that away a little bit.
Well,
right?
it turns into
something a little duller.
If only they were healthy. If only people could have stayed healthy. If only this wasn't the year that everyone got hurt.
man, I mean, kind of. I mean, because it's the quarterback, it's like that one's the focus. I don't know that the Vikings, player for player, were more hurt than any other team in the league this year. It's just, when it's your best offensive player and your most important offensive player, which in this case were two different people, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, um, it kind of sticks out, right? And then the free agent cornerback and the free agent edge rusher that you signed, it kind of sticks out. But the number of injuries was like not extreme. They even may have had fewer injuries than the average NFL team this year. It's really just a question of that. Like, to me, the quarterback thing is like the thing that gets me. If that defense had held up for just one more game and it only collapsed for 2 games instead of 3, or if they had held up against the Lions or whatever in the final game, I think it would have been much easier for us to be like, man, what could have happened? What could have been, if Kirk Cousins was healthy, like he has been every other year of his career. They would have marched into the playoffs, the number 1 defense in the NFL, certainly in the NFC anyway. And they would have had a crazy good offense. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely, we've talked in the podcast how this would have been one of the what if years that people talk about, and I still think it will be. I just think it doesn't feel as much like that as it did coming off of like the 3-0 Raiders win, right? Like coming off of that win, you're like, man, that defense is nuts. They could have, like, if they still had that top 10 offense, man, they could have really made waves. And now I'm just like, yeah, they would have gotten. Maybe they probably would have gotten past the first round, but that defense is now, I don't know.
Yeah, it's I'd say the bloom is off the rose, but it's been like that for a while. This has been it's one of those things where it feels like the season, like the team just kind of limped to the finish. Like it very much feels like there was just nothing left to give.
Yeah, that might be it. It's just like they kind of pulled out every single trick that they had, and the well ran dry right at the end. It was just like, oh, okay, we don't have a thing for this one. Oh, rough. Like it just felt like they had like interesting wrinkles, the different approaches and stuff like that, and they just ran out of time, right? Like if it was a college season that had lasted, 15 games or 15 weeks instead of like an 18-week season, like, oh, wow, this would have been one of the greatest defensive performances we've ever seen. But instead, the season continued and they just couldn't get it done. Obviously, again, the Byron Murphy injury plays a role, but it just felt like, and I don't know if that has anything to do. I briefly made a joke in the Minnesota Football Party with the Kevin Seifert article getting published and the defense getting exposed. I don't know if it has anything to do with that. And certainly if it did, I wouldn't blame a reporter for reporting, right? Because, they could have just asked him they said, hey, we'll give you the quotes on the condition that you don't publish until after the season or something, right? Like, everybody chose to give him those quotes and he chose to publish them, and it's not his fault, right? And he has no obligation to the team either way. So I don't want to say that that's what happened, but certainly I think that it's his fault, right? Or that I blame him, but certainly that's a factor in a discussion, right? That like this article gets published, and in the article they talk about how they took from Pitt's defense, which could encourage offensive coordinators to take a look at which teams had done well against Pitt, that they were actually playing a 4 or 5 man zone behind the blitz when most people thought they were playing man coverage, which could have encouraged them to take a look at the way the zone landmarks or the switching rules worked, right? Like that could have changed the way that teams approach them. And while they did play pretty well coming off of the week that the article was published, it was against the Raiders, right? Where Aiden O'Connell hadn't played a good defense all year. That is something to keep in mind along with the injuries, right? So, it really felt like there was just like nothing left to do on that defense. Like if Mike Zimmer had been forced to play multiple games where Everson Griffin was a defensive tackle and Andrew Zendeo was a nickel corner, like that trick would have stopped working. And here, Brian Flores has pulled out like 15 or 16 tricks. And we're done. The season's still going. We're done.
Yeah. A number of players are going to be gone next year. A number of players are going to ask for a lot of money Danielle Hunter specifically is going to be worth a large chunk of money. And I don't know that the Vikings try to match that because somebody is going to give him a biblical amount of money after this very much prove it year.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Like, obviously, some players you're just going to be able to let go without having to think of too much. Though there is a void associated with somebody like a Marcus Davenport, right? It's like they walk away, you're like, okay, whatever. With Danielle Hunter, so it sounds like, according to Brad Spielberger, who does all of the contract projections, or Spielenberger, sorry, does all the contract projections for Pro Football Focus, and he's generally pretty accurate about this stuff. He projects something like a $23 or $22 million a year deal for Danielle Hunter per year, right? Danielle Hunter currently has a $14.9 million dead cap associated with the team. And that comes from void money. So he took on a signing bonus with a void year attached to it, or multiple void years, but probably just one. And when the contract voids, that's when that signing bonus accelerates into the void year and causes $14.9 million in dead space. Now, if the Vikings extend him before the void in the contract is triggered, or they negotiate an extension that moves the void back a couple of weeks, which they did with Dalvin Tomlinson last year, then or was it Dalvin Tomlinson? It was somebody. But they could have that re-spread out over the next 2 years of whatever his extension is. And so you no longer have to worry about 14. So you free up about $15 million in cap space, right? So that is possible, right? You got a guy that might sign for $22 million a year. You don't have to take, it's possible, I think, maybe given the nature of that void calculation, and I'll take a look at his cap right now. But the worst scenario is that he takes up $14.9 million in cap space like this year as a result of that void money being forced to, you have to guarantee that money in some way. And so you just pay him that this year, like $14.9 million in base salary, or more likely $7 million in base salary and whatever the signing bonus divided by however many years in the rest for the void year. That's possible. So he's expensive, but the Vikings have a unique incentive through that void money to not have to, okay, it's 2 void years. So that's what I thought. So if they extend him, they are mandated to take $7.5 million in prorated bonus this year. So they'll free up $7.5 million with an extension immediately, no matter what. And then they might be able to just work around that, give him like $1 million base salary with a big signing bonus that allows him to only take up like $9 million in cap space this year. Great. Fantastic. And then in the future years, you can kind of figure that out. But yeah, he's going to be expensive, but you're not going to have to worry about it necessarily that much. Kirk Cousins, if you extend him, you get rid of the void money on his contract, which is $29 million a year. So the Vikings only have $37 million in cap space, but a lot of that's in void money. And I think, was it $5 million of it you have to take no matter what, but he has a signing bonus extension where 2 years of void money come in 2024, and then there's a 4-year void as well, which come in obviously again in 2024. So his cap number next year is like $28.5 million, even though he won't be on the roster. You can get rid of all but $10 million of that just by signing an extension. So yeah, there's a lot of free agency dollars you have to allocate, but a lot of it is kind of hidden cap space available to the Vikings.
And then, of course, there's Justin Jefferson, who is going to...
Yeah, there's no magical money trick with this one.
No. You're stuck with this one. He's going to be worth every penny between 30 and 40 million, and you're just going to have to accept it. But as a result of bringing him back, you have to think that he is going to prefer to have someone who's not a rookie quarterback throwing him the ball.
You'd think, I don't know that it matters a ton what he wants in terms of like the quarterback, right? So first of all, the Vikings do have him under contract for 2024. Like it's a 5th-year option, right?
I mean,
So they just have
it
him under
screams
contract.
holdout, but yes.
Yeah. It's not like a franchise tag at least, but yeah. So like you could, because it is guaranteed, you have to convert it into signing bonus or something like that. So it is already accounted for in the cap calculation of $37 million. So in a sense, it's an accounting trick, I guess. Except you're actually paying him and he's actually on the roster, which is a little bit different. But you could free up cap space, converting that 19.7 into a signing bonus for an extension, say over 5 years. That's about $4 million a year, just a little bit under. And then you give him a signing bonus on top of that, so that he gets some immediate money, so he doesn't have to worry about the fact that his base salary is like $1 million. And because of that, so you give him like a signing bonus of like 40 million, right? So it's like 10 plus the 4 plus the 1, so it's 15. So you can reduce the cap hit by about $4 million while still giving him $30 million this year, right? Well, actually 50 million because you're including the salary into the signing bonus. So yeah, it's you can do it. You can free up cap space doing it, but it is just like real money that you got to pay him. So yeah, you got to extend him before this triggers, or not before it triggers, but like before you have to get into a fight about it, I guess, which would be hold out in OTAs or in training camp. But you prefer to do it during free agency, so that you've got the cap space freed up available to, and you know your cap situation. That's going to be expensive, but again, people are worried about the cap space. There's a bunch of areas where you can kind of clear up a lot of that cap space. I think also, so who are the 2024 free agents? So obviously we expected Justin Jefferson deal. He is technically under contract through this year, but like, the Vikings want to bring back Jordan Hicks. It felt like he was pretty important to the way the team operated this year. That's not going to be expensive, but that's going to be something, right? I think he earned a $3.5 million contract on a 1-year deal for the Vikings this year. Well, I would argue that he improved, despite being, he's going to be 33 next year. I would argue he improved his contract prospects a little bit by playing better than he did in Arizona, right? Dalton Risner, you don't have a long-term guard because you traded Ezra Cleveland away. Fine. Okay. You're probably going to have to extend him. He's making $2.8 million a year. You probably have to pay him $3-4 million, right? You're going to have to figure out kicker. It doesn't have to be Greg Joseph. In fact, you consider other options.
It might be better not to.
Yeah, it might be better. Who's to say, right? He's just like the lowest graded kicker over the last 3 years. But who's to say? It could be anybody. It could even be a boat.
It could be Eddie Pinheiro. No, it could not be Eddie Pinheiro. No. Let's not. Let's
perish the thought.
Yes.
You're going to want to add another running back. Probably not Cam Akers, but want to add another running back. You're probably going to add some interior defensive linemen because both Sheldon Day and Jonathan Bullard are gone. They both played really significant snaps this year. That's going to be another $1 million, right? So all of these small ones that add up to $1 million, there's probably like 10 or so signings where it's like that guy's going to rotate in, right? Like that guy, maybe you're not bringing Johnny Munt back, but you're bringing in a tight end kind of like him. Right, unless that one Nick Muse catch like really got you going, you're probably going to bring in a guy like that. You're losing Brandon Powell and KJ Osborne. You're probably going to bring in a guy to do that, even if you do draft a receiver, right? So there's like a lot of areas where there's just going to be like, here's $1 million, here's $3 million, here's $4 million, and you got to figure that out. That I think is the more stressful part of the contract stuff, not the Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, Justin Jefferson stuff, because there's some free money floating around there. But the more stressful stuff is like, hey, you don't have any line. Well, you've got the undrafted free agent and the 3rd round pick you benched. But aside from that, you don't have any linebackers. And I mean that. Nobody, right? You've got Jordan Hicks is gone. Troy Dye is gone. I think Anthony Barr and Nick Vigil are gone. Okay. You got to bring in a guy. so there's like a couple of areas where they do have to spend $3-4 million here, $3-4 million there. They're losing a couple of their backup offensive linemen too. So it's a big, because Blake Brandel is a restricted free agent, so you could probably just bring him back, but that's $2 million, right? You're losing, like I said, Risner, but you're also losing Oli Udoh and David Quessenberry and Hakeem Adeniji, right? And those are, you don't need all of those guys, but losing 4 or 5 guys, probably gonna have to sign 3, right? So I don't know. There's like a lot of areas where it's like, oh, here's another $1 million you got to spend.
Can we talk about Nick Muse for a moment? What a glorious moment in his career. His cat-like reflexes were finally on display, and he was able to make a fantastic catch. All right, that's it for Nick Muse. But I just wanted to point out that he looked fantastic for that snap.
Yeah, just a Nick Muse moment from Meow.
Yes, thank you. Let's not get stuck into that particular game, and let's go to the mailbag. Chris asks, if you could erase the Kirk injury, the JJ injury, or half the team's turnovers this year, which one has the most impact?
So initially, my immediate response was the quarterback. Obviously, you want that guy back. But like, if you could have Nick Mullins at half his turnovers, holy crap, that's a good quarterback. That's the dream of Jameis Winston, right? Like that's the
you start to hit the Josh Allen echelon at that point where
that's a good quarterback.
They just built into their offense. Josh Allen's gonna do dumb crap, like he's gonna throw like 2 picks, but we can work around that. We just need to score more.
Yeah, and it actually worked this year, right? Like
in defiance of many people, yes.
Yeah, but not importantly God's will.
Logic, possibly God's will. Bruce Allen, like,
with the power of true teamwork.
Inshallah.
Will return to their glory days. Okay, so I was thinking about this because like the easiest answer actually is to eliminate half the turnovers because the Vikings were once again leading the league in one-score games. They had 14 one-score games this year. They went 6-8 in one-score games, which means 8 of their 9 losses were one-score games. And if you cut their turnovers in half, like I'm not saying every single game where you cut the turnovers in half is a one-score difference, but it's close to every one of them. It's real close, right? So let's be, instead of 8, let's say they win 5 of those. I think that's extremely fair. When you cut out half the turnovers in one-score games, you turn some of those 8 into wins, right? And I think more than half, but only slightly more, so 5. So then you are 11-3 in one-score games, and then you add the other win that they got that was not a one-score game. So you're 12-5. That's like what? That's a team, right? That's a good team. So you end up at the playoffs. So that's the lowest. I think. Or the highest floor, not the lowest ceiling, the highest floor version of answering this question. And I'm sorry I got rid of JJ on this one, but like the 5-0 win streak was in the middle of JJ's injury, right? This is not a wide receiver wins thing. It's when JJ was healthy, you didn't there are not many more wins to add because he was already healthy in the losses, if that makes sense, right? So eliminating JJ's injury, you probably get 2 or 3 wins back, which this is not an argument about how impactful he is. I think he's uniquely impactful as a receiver. It just happens to be that didn't work out the way it did. So you're returning games where there's a low return because they're already wins. So probably not that one. So I'm just eliminating that one. The Kirk thing, that one's pretty interesting because before the injury to Kirk, they were 11th in EPA per play. And after that, they were 22nd in EPA per play. And, Mullins is like a pretty interesting case of how EPA per play kind of breaks a little bit because Mullins is at his worst when EPA per play is at its wonkiest, right? The expected point value of a deep interception, it's negative, right? But it is not enormously negative compared to the average interception, an interception over the middle, or, a short pick 6 or something like that, right? Like those interceptions have a much bigger negative impact on EPA. So his like deep throw to Jefferson that Jefferson was open and that should have been a touchdown, but actually it's a pick because he threw it, too far outside or something like that. The EPA of that throw is negative, but it's not tremendously negative. But the EPA on his positive throws, like that touchdown to Jordan Addison, was tremendously positive. So he's like kind of like how people used to accuse Kirk of gaming the passer rating system. He's kind of gaming the EPA system. from a wins probability added, which includes leverage, right? It includes like the time remaining in the game as like a factor in a way that EPA does not. When you include that, his interceptions came at the worst time because those are the times he needed to push the most, and he was just a little bit less careful. And if Nick Mullins is already not careful and then he is just a little bit less careful, it's pick city. And so I think you add wins, even though Nick Mullins is not changing your EPA per play all that much. So the win probability coming from the quarterback position is lower. So I think you end up with a top 10 offense the entire season if you have Kirk Cousins healthy the whole time, even in the 8 games that JJ is not healthy, right? Like I think that's pretty fair. I think you score more than 3 points against Las Vegas is what I'm saying, right? Again, these are like 1-score games, right? If 80 or losses, 1-score losses, let's say 4 of them, I don't remember, came when Kirk was out, right? Or probably 6 of them came when Kirk was out because he had 2 at the beginning of the season. But let's say 4 of them came when Kirk was out. You're almost certainly winning 2 or 3 of those, right? So you're probably winning fewer games, but you're setting yourself up probably for the playoffs in a better way, assuming this hypothetical playoff game plays out normally, and then you just randomly eliminate half the interceptions or whatever, right? Half the turnovers. That's the comparison versus just having Kirk in there. Also, it should be noted that having Kirk in there probably does reduce your turnovers like automatically. Like I know he wasn't the greatest turnover dude, but that wasn't like his fault, right? It was just like, yeah, we're just bouncing some balls off a receiver's hands. It's no big deal. KJ Osborne, you don't need to catch that. That's not your job today. You got to tackle. That's your job today. That's not Kirk's fault. So you're probably reducing your turnovers anyway. You're probably not throwing 4 picks against the Packers, right? So there's also that. So probably for a playoff run, it's Kirk. But to guarantee the playoffs, it's the turnovers one because you throw a quarterback in there, even if he's a better quarterback, he could just have a bad day. But we're guaranteeing that we're eliminating turnovers. That gives you a really high floor. So that's my answer.
Also, the question is, which specific player are you rooting for in the playoffs?
Case Cookus.
He's not on a team in the NFL.
Well, he's on the Memphis Breakers, which is a professional football team.
Yes, but they are not in their playoffs yet, nor is that the NFL playoffs. That's the UFL.
Well, the question didn't say the NFL. Okay, so NFL players that are in the playoffs that I'm rooting for, a lot of the AFC quarterbacks, I just like them. Obviously, I like Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't need me to root for him. But it would be kind of funny if, like, in his worst year, he was like, yeah, I'll just screw around, I'll win a playoff game or the Super Bowl again. That would be very funny, right? I like that. I like Josh Allen bumbling his way into a Super Bowl. Just like sheer force. So the entire Bills team is just forcing the issue, right? And it's just like, yeah, we're going to win this game doing the stupidest things you have ever seen. It's going to be great. I love it. We're big and we're dumb, and that's our superpower. That's great. That's so cool. Lamar Jackson, I'd love for Lamar Jackson to win a Super Bowl. That would rock. I'd love. There's like obviously like a lot of cultural reasons, but also just like love watching him play.
Lamar would be interesting too because he was basically a pariah last offseason. The teams declaring they weren't going to like try to match or like try to like go after him when he was doing his arguing about like playoffs or not playoff about contract stuff. Like he was absolutely a pariah last offseason. Now
it was nuts.
MVP.
And I got different reasons every time, right? Every time someone reported on like the fact that no one made an offer, I got like a different reason every single time. I was so obnoxious. It just felt like it, which makes it feel like it's not genuine, right? But like, we're not going to do the Ravens work for them to negotiate a contract is the weakest reason I have ever heard in my life. And the fact that it was one of the strongest reasons people gave is mind-boggling to me. And the fact that like people who like, like know about the NFL, right? They're like NFL insiders. And I don't mean like sarcastically, like genuine NFL insiders, right? Who like very clearly, have the phone numbers of like 30 executives across the NFL in high positions in their contacts, right? are just like, yeah, I mean, obviously they don't want to do the work that somebody else will just take and steal and sign. Well, first of all, that doesn't make any sense because any contract structure that works for you, it's not going to work for another team. That makes no sense. Second, what work? It's a quarterback contract. Like, it's just, look, man, you do this every year. Every free agency, you are offering contracts to players, and most of the time you offer a contract to a player, they don't sign it because they signed with another team. That's how it works. There's 32 teams and there's one of that player, right? So like most of the time you are doing that and you're fine with it. But suddenly it's the most valuable position in the league and one of the best players that's ever like I don't understand the reasons that they gave. Then some people were talking about like his injury proneness, the fact that he's a mobile quarterback. And it's like, well, let that happen then. This is a shot at the Super Bowl. So it would be awesome if Lamar Jackson won a ring just because of all of that BS that happened this offseason that like very clearly felt like collusion to prevent a moment of player empowerment that puts players back on the front foot when it came to negotiating for their rights. Like that's what that is. In the NFC, players that I'm rooting for, I hate the Dallas Cowboys, but I kind of like Dak Prescott. That's a very tough one. I kind of hate that he has the Tony Romo narrative of not being able to win in the playoffs, which, by the way, Lamar Jackson also has. But it was weird because people talked about that in his second year in the league. They're like, he has to get the monkey off his back in terms of playoff wins. And it's like, it's his second year. Can we not? But sure. Dak Prescott has that too. I'd like for him to be able to get rid of that. The Eagles, not really. The 49ers, obviously not. Just because I've got the whole Brock Purdy bit, so I got to cheer against him now. I don't really care that much about Baker. It's kind of an interesting story. I made him my comeback player of the year because I just figured, like, I know DeMar Hamlin's going to win it, but like, I just feel like if you're a comeback player, you have to have made an impact on the field before you left, and then also after you came back. And DeMar Hamlin deserves all kinds of awards, but like maybe not that one. So I gave it to Baker Mayfield. I don't know that there's a ton of NFC guys that are like, obviously Jordan Love needs to fail. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Did the Seahawks make the playoffs? I don't.
Seahawks did not. And you knew that. Yeah.
No, I didn't. You talk about? I don't know who made the playoffs.
Reeve, you knew the Seahawks didn't make it, and we'll cover that in a bit. Maximilius asks, probability of it actually occurring aside, what does the best possible offseason for the Vikings this year look like?
Kirk signs a 2-year extension that's a little bit below market value. His market is going to be really weird to predict. Spielberg predicted like 35 million a year, which I thought was low for a quarterback contract, but let's say it's like 32, which is really low. But again, Spielberg was pretty good at this. So 32 for 2 years. Then one of the 3 top quarterbacks falls to the Vikings at pick 11, I think. Is it 11?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I saw because I'm also doing the Chargers thing right now. I think they pick 5. And then I also saw a bunch of teams like tweet out their pick. And it's like the Raiders are 13 and I'm screwed up. Okay, the Vikings pick at 11. One of those 3 quarterbacks falls. So let's say Caleb Williams and Drake May go. Then it's like Jaden Daniels, right? So they get to pick him in the first. And then in the second, they pick a cornerback who falls. There's a lot of cornerbacks in this year's draft, it looks like, based off of kind of the mock drafts that are going around. The boards I've already seen in anticipation of building the consensus board. One of those cornerbacks falls, and in the third round, you can find maybe an edge rusher or something like that. So you sign JJ, you signed Anil, you sign Kirk, you get your quarterback of the future, somebody like Jaden Daniels, in the first round. So you don't have to worry about like the disaster we saw from both quarterbacks in this championship game that just happened. I think that kind of sets you up. I haven't really taken a ton of looks at like free agents, mostly because I've been looking at, Vikings free agents. I'm sure PFF already has like their free agency guide out, but if I just take a look at the free agency tracker, we've got maybe a couple of edge rushers to take a look at. Let me see. I said the free agency tracker. I meant the over the cap one. But hey, Zadarius Smith is a free agent. That'd be kind of funny. Not a ton of edge rushers out here. You probably would not be able to sign Josh Allen, the Jaguars' Josh Allen. But he would be kind of interesting to go after because he's nearly an all-pro type talent. There was rumors that they were going to trade him. Bryce Huff from the Jets had an extremely good year. I think it's fair to say that a lot of that came from how good the rest of the Jets are around him, but that's fine. Technically, the Chase Young is going to be available as a free agent. He'd be fun to sign, something like that. But sign an edge rusher that's not DJ Wanham, who is technically also a free agent. And then there's a couple of cornerbacks out there that are worth signing. So if you grab somebody like Chidobe Awuzie, or because you don't have to sign like an Adoree Jackson or Stephon Gilmore, you could sign like Awuzie. You're probably not going to be able to sign Emmanuel Mosley, who this is a void year for him, so he'd be available. But take a look at him, take a look at Kendall Fuller. But I do think that in addition to drafting a cornerback in the first 2 rounds, you do need to sign one, right? It could even be, Keyshawn Nixon from the Packers, who's a really great returner and an okay slot corner. But that would, I think, improve your prospects too, even though you've already got your slot corner in Mekhi Blackmon, right? I think that you can't just rely on that. So I think, that would be an ideal free agency. Again, there's not a ton of players out there that are like super worth it, right? That are super worth like a look in free agency, that are super worth, a trade for something like that, that would be available. But I think at edge and at quarterback, grabbing, 2 of the top guys, maybe taking a look at that linebacker market and saying, hey, Frankie Luvu, you're an incredible blitzer. And we've got a space for you on this defense. Because of that, we'll sign you at linebacker. Like that'd be fine. Right. But yeah, I think that ideally you sign those 3, you sign some of the important depth, and then you grab a cornerback and an edge defender in the first 2 picks after that quarterback. So 2nd, 3rd round pick. Then you grab a cornerback and an edge player in free agency. And now you're free to figure out kind of what you want to do at receiver, what you want to do at running back, et cetera. That one matters a little bit less to me because, your 3rd receiver or your starting running back just has to be like a good enough player, right? You don't have to go out and sign Derrick Henry, who technically is available, right? You could go out and sign like a Damian Harris, right? He's available, right? That I think would be fine, right? So that's probably ideal. I think that you can manage it. I think doing a mock off season is something that would be pretty well suited to the Wide Left blog. So I've got another assignment this week that's going to take me like kind of a lot of time. So there's not going to be as much content on Wide Left aside from like the perfunctory stuff that I have to like take care of. And then obviously Luke's actually already turned in his piece, but things have already changed since when he turned it in. So he's going to have to edit it tomorrow morning, but we've got that coming in too. But yeah, I've got a busy week. So next week, I'm going to take a look at maybe a mock off season that's going to create maybe an ideal scenario for the Vikings.
Yeah, cool. Kane Cookus asks, just before the start of the season, Kane Cookus, Secret Base ended their series in the Vikings with John Boyce waxing poetic on the shape of the football as a metaphor for how the more you try to control things, the more things can get out of control. What did he know?
As a very Joshua Dobbs approach to football. No, I just feel like if you cover sports the way John Boyce does, through the most interesting stories it could possibly come up with, then that's the only conclusion you could have, right? I don't know like how you could do a documentary on the Mariners and the Falcons and the Vikings and not come to that conclusion. That's the only conclusion you could have.
Yeah. Also, for Arif's definitely won't be starting any more games for us next season corner. Dobbs with a full offseason, or Nick, he's down there somewhere Mullins as our backup quarterback moving forwards. We kind of covered this a bit last episode when we asked if the future Vikings quarterback was currently on our roster.
If Dobbs had a full offseason, I don't know how much better he would be. But I do think that Nick, like, because my whole deal with like backup quarterbacks is that you tend to sign guys that give you high floors and low ceilings when it should be the opposite. And I used to think that was Joshua Dobbs, but Nick Mullins is wild. He's crazy. It's definitely him. I think it should be Mullins should be the next backup. But yeah.
Does
Hopefully
Mullins
Jaron Hall gets better.
does Mullins win the MVP of the UFL next year if you were to start and just throw like 7 touchdown passes a game and 4 picks?
Yeah, it's not close. He would demolish with like 4 picks a game, 100%.
Even Case Cook goes to be like, I can't compete with that.
Also, oh yeah, Ben DiNucci is not in the UFL because he just signed with the Broncos.
Yep, he signed his futures deal, so he is back. He's back in as the third quarterback. Well, soon to be second quarterback because they're about to get rid of Russell Wilson. He's number 3 right now on the depth chart. Number 1 on your heart.
I need to iterate once again that when I started both the Ben DiNucci and the Case Cookis bits, it had not occurred to me in the wildest realm of imagination that these guys would stick around for more than a year.
Yep.
Just in the public consciousness, much less on rosters. I mean, the bits are strong, but that's crazy.
Yep. Ben DiNucci is continuing his quest to sidearm his way into playing for the Denver Broncos again next year. Good for him. He's also the same guy that Sean Payton yelled at, said you're going to be a bag boy at Walmart or something like that. Glorious. If you throw another one like that, you know that's what your profession's gonna be. It's gonna be great. A second jet has hit Drew Bledsoe. Asks, for a Reef's alternative facts corner, could Dobbs have had this performance on offense? Got it, referring to the Nick Mullins thing.
391. I forget how many yards it was. 390 something yards? No. Like, could he have put more points on the board? Yeah. Could he have done it in as impactful way as Nick Mullins? Because every play matters with Nick Mullins, right? It's like a sack, it's a touchdown, it's a pick, it's a fumble. Like, those are your options, right? A completion for 9 yards is like low on the list of happenings there. I do think it's possible that Dobbs could have scored more points, but I think it's unlikely. But I don't know that he's going to be as impactful every single play that he drops back to pass is the difference. So yes and no. I think Dobbs could have hit that point total of 20, I guess. But I don't think it could have been as, I don't want to say as exciting, because every time he, like, as soon as the play hits 3 seconds, he's extremely exciting. But as impactful, I just don't think it would be.
Roro asks, could you articulate a reason for hope for the 2024 season, please?
Yeah, it's the guys are healthy. Everyone likes Kevin O'Connell. The defense was good for most of the year. You're probably keeping the defensive coordinator. We've already seen the interview lists for all these teams, and I don't think any of them. I'm sure the Daily Norseman has the most recent updates on whether or not a Vikings coordinator was contacted. So I'm sure there's going to be a piece out there if that has happened. But from what I've seen as of this recording, I haven't seen Brian Flores on any of those lists. Again, I think that's because, he's like suing the league, right? Like, I just feel like an owner doesn't want potential legal exposure for interviewing this guy and not hiring him.
Right.
Just not to say they'd be right to do that. What's that?
Right. Like, that was my reasoning for this isn't going to happen. Like, I'm not saying there's collusion in the league, but I am saying there's collusion in the league. Like, there's no way this, if he gets a head coaching thing, cool, but I really, really don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Right. Like, when I describe an owner's incentive, this is not me suggesting that they're acting ethically, but from their perspective, first of all, from their perspective, they don't want people that they employ to have power over them. So one, there's going to be an element of people who challenge the league are unlikely to be able to use that and earn a head coaching job, right? I think that that's one. Two, I think that there's also secondarily an incentive for owners to see somebody that they perceive to be litigious. Now, a litigious person very often is within their rights. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? But they see someone as potentially litigious that they interview and then they don't hire, and now they're concerned that they're going to be subject to this lawsuit. That might be how they think. That's not how this lawsuit is playing out, by the way. It's not like, did you interview him and not hire him? Now you're getting sued. That's not what's happening, right? But that may be how owners perceive it, because to them, they don't really do anything wrong, right? Them as an ownership class, they're clean in their own perception, and so that's how they'll see it, right? And so that's why I don't think he's getting interviews, or he's going to get interviews at least this year until the lawsuit's resolved. And I think they just kind of don't want to, I don't want to say reward that behavior, but rather they don't want to enable the idea that coaches have a little bit more control over the way that they run their team than an owner does. It's very bad for them. So with that in mind, I think that you'll get Brian Flores coordinating the defense for another year, which I think that while the defensive scheme may have fallen apart, I don't think that's like the thing, right? Like, I don't think it's like, well, he had the one trick, it's gone now. It's not like a Chip Kelly thing where it's like, well, now that the trick has expired, he's done. No, I think that he is a smart defensive coordinator and a smart coach, and he'll come up with something a little bit more tailored to something that'll last a little bit longer. Probably not talk to Kevin Seifert this time around. And have something with a more talented defense at the ready. You'll still have Kirk, I think. You'll still have Justin. You'll still have a surprisingly adept offensive line. You'll have an offense. The offense is almost guaranteed to be top 15 if mostly healthy. It's the defense, and the defense is going to get a lot of investment. They're going to get one or two new cornerbacks that are better than a Caleb Evans. They're going to get one or two edge rushers that are better than DJ Wanham, right? You're going to add that onto a team that I genuinely think will re-sign to Neil Hunter as much as he's been frustrated. And you're going to have Ivan Pace ready to just start, ready to just go right away, right? You'll probably have to figure out something at safety, given the Harrison Smith stuff. But the thing is, you are playing three safeties. You have two good safeties, right? So you could not run a three safety defense next year. And just when you sign two cornerbacks, now you've got more cornerbacks available to you, right? So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about next year, just aside from the fact that they're the Vikings. That I'm not going to be able to articulate my way out of that one. But I think on paper, this team is set up to do pretty well.
Yeah. A Hyundai for one of us is a Hyundai for all of us asks, since we finally have the sweet release of the offseason, which corner are you looking forward to vacationing in? Arif's parenting corner, James's relationship corner, maybe revisit the baby corner, or Arif's dude, where's my car corner? The world is really your oyster.
Okay, I definitely don't want to revisit the dude, where's my car corner. That's not a vacation to me. And I think somehow the parenting corner is even less of a vacation.
Yeah, someone's going to get sick.
Yeah, they're going to invent new diseases. Like, come on. I don't want to handle kids. You've heard my parenting corner. How is that a vacation for me?
Yeah.
It's very fly-by-night stuff for me. James's relationship corner, I think, out of all of the ones that you've mentioned, is shockingly the least depressing out of all of these.
Yeah, let's go with that. Also, if the Vikings roster is able to keep both coordinators, what is one positive and one concern each can build on moving forward to next season?
So let's combine like Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell into one coordinator for the offense. I think the positive is that they know that it is better as an underdog to be aggressive, right? They build an aggressive offense and they commit to that even more when they're underdogs. And it looked really frustrating, and I get it, and it should be, but when you're an underdog, you tend to lose by a lot or win by a lot, like by being aggressive, right? I think that's fine. I think that they were smart to do it, and I think it's good that they're an aggressive offense, right? The concern that I have is that the adaptability of the offense, I think that the offense is very flexible when you come into the season. I think that its ability to adapt to defenses is really good. I think its own ability to adapt to its own offensive talent mid-season is a concern. And I think it's an overblown concern because I think a lot of offenses have that difficulty. Again, I'm going to write a piece defending Kevin O'Connell. But that is a concern, right? Luke wrote a piece about how Jared Hall was put into a position to fail based off of his skill set and what he's historically been good at and bad at. And I think that that's fair, right? So I think that that's like once they have in mind what the offense they want to run, they think, how can we tailor this offense that we have designed to the opponent, as opposed to how can we tailor this offense that we've designed to our players that now have to run it a little bit differently. So that's a concern I have on offense. On defense, I think I kind of laid it out a little bit earlier. I do think that they are a smart defense. I think that they're not afraid to take chances about the way that they run that defense, but that defense has been solved. And so until we have knowledge that they have changed the way that defense operates to resolve the fact that it was essentially solved by division opponents, no less, right? One of whom was not even a repeat opponent. The first, like they played the Lions the first time the Lions beat it, right? So they had solved the defense before having played it once. So there's that, right? Until that happens, you can't really, like, I believe that Brian Flores is smart and adaptable and can create an additional defensive scheme, essentially, that will allow them to get around it. But I don't know that, right? I believe it, but until that gets proven, then there's always that concern in the back. So that I think is the concern. But the positive is, like, I don't know. Did you see the defense play this year? That was great. That team is not good on defense. Those players are not good, mostly. Am I wrong?
No, that's the thing, is that a lot was done with a very small amount. And eventually that small amount just got smaller and smaller.
So that's a huge positive for Brian Flores.
Raul asks, as things stand in the draft, it looks like we're in range for the older quarterback prospects, Nix and Penix. Is there a cognitive dissonance in re-signing old man Kirk and drafting one of these older quarterbacks?
I mean, not really, but I get it. It's like, oh, we got to get younger. All right, well, get the guy who's like 3 years into his master's. Like, I get it, but no, it's not really a concern. There's other concerns. I don't think it's like cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. Next question is from Ingram's Left Arm, who asks, for a Reeves smoke 'em if you got him corner, are you shaking mad about your Seahawks celebrating their 16th draft position? I suppose the smoke 'em if you got him is referring to the cigar celebration.
Oh, okay. They're not my Seahawks, first of all. Did the Seahawks celebrate their draft position? Did they send out a tweet that was like, hey, hooray, we're picking 16th?
Well, more so they celebrated the fact that they won their game and were doing so in the locker room with cigars, but I don't know that they're necessarily celebrating the fact that they have the 16th pick, but they were celebrating.
Okay, well, why would I be mad about that? Let's pretend, and again, this would be pretend, that I was a Seahawks fan, right? Again, not a reality. This is not the case. This is an active pretend. We are play acting.
You know the Vikings play there again this next season. That's a possible live show.
We've already done a live show there.
Yeah, but
there's so many places we've not done a live show.
Podolsky's was great.
Okay, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't need to do another live show there. We've already done a live show there, James.
Just
Germany is waiting for us. Germany is waiting for us.
Well, about that.
No, why would I feel like players should celebrate their wins. I was already advocating for the Vikings to win anyway. Like, I don't care. Yeah, I love watching teams try to win. I love watching teams celebrate wins. That's what I like. So, yeah, I don't know why I would be upset about that in a hypothetical world where I'm a Seahawks fan, which, again, I remind you is a hypothetical because it is not the case.
Let's go to Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat, who had a question I rejected outright. So this is their version that they are getting through. Who on the Vikings would you most like to see fired into the sun after this season? I can think of a certain player's arm.
It would probably be fair. I don't think it would be controversial among most Vikings fans to say Greg Joseph, right? Like, I feel like everyone would be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's fair. Other than that, I mean, I had concerns about the Vikings drafting Ed Ingram, right, in like a pretty big way, but aside from off-field stuff, like he's improved as a player, right? So I don't know. Caleb Evans is like I don't think I would pick him. I think he had 3 bad games, along with a lot of players in the defense, but he mostly played pretty well this season. So, I don't think I'd pick him. I think as a 4th round pick, there's a lot of room for development and growth there. I have to go with Greg Joseph. I don't know that there's another player I'd pick.
I mean,
maybe Alexander Madison. I don't know. It's hard to be mad at like him. It's not his fault he's slow.
No, I think it ends up being like a Madison thing, or just you do that to Harrison Smith so you don't have to watch him on another team.
This is not about you. This is about me.
Yes.
Fire.
Eldon asks, for a Reefs playoff scenarios corner, we all know that Joe Flacco is not only elite, but probably the greatest quarterback in NFL history, past, present, and future.
That's redundant. I just want to point out that phrase was redundant.
After he leads the Browns to a Super Bowl victory over the 49ers, how fast does the Hall of Fame induct him? Or do they get him a gold jacket at halftime, or do they wait for the Browns to give him a massive contract and cut Watson? I can't even imagine how much dead cap that would actually cause to cut Watson.
Does he have rolling? That's actually a really good question. If he has a rolling guarantee, that's a little bit different because it's still a lot of dead cap, but it's not the same.
No.
So let's take a look.
The best thing that I saw while you're looking that up, the best thing I saw involving the Browns over the past weekend was the Hydra jersey that has all the names of the quarterbacks since Tim Couch, and instead of Deshaun Watson's name, they just have the sexual assault survivors pin on that. Like that's the name there for him.
Right in the name Chiron for it. Yeah, yes. That was really cool. All right, so if they cut Deshaun Watson in 2024, they would incur a dead cap hit of $136.9 million, which I believe is half the cap. We've got a little calculator here. Let's see what happens if we do the Browns cap calculator. All right, calculator. Oh man, Amari Cooper's taking a lot of the cap. That's pretty annoying. Deshaun Watson, $63.97 million in cap space. Well, we'll just cut him, and now the Browns are negative $149 million against the cap.
Boy, that's some Saints math right there.
Well, let's cut him post June 1st. We'll do that. Oh, with that, that's only $104 million.
Oh, that's
negative.
Yeah, you're probably fine there. It was funny to me.
We could just trade Amari Cooper, so let's do that. And now we're at negative $92 million. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Let's trade Nick Chubb. I'm sure Browns fans will be, because running backs don't matter. I'm sure Browns fans will be comfortable with that.
Now, if you sell the team to Canada, to like Toronto, the way the cap works, is there any sort of trade off as far as the currency is concerned?
Right, yeah, because if it's $80 million, so I just traded Dalvin Tomlinson, so now I've only got negative $80 million. But if it's 80 million Canadian, which I'm sure the players will be fine being paid in Canadian dollars.
Naturally.
Okay, I just Googled 80 million Canadians. So let me first get rid of the S and add 2 USD. Well, that's just negative 60 US. Yeah.
Oh, we're getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah, that's easy. This is so easy. You trade Zadarius Smith. Okay, actually, that's worse. Don't do that. Myles Garrett. Okay, I'm sure you could get multiple first-round picks for my pick for the MVP or at least Defensive Player of the Year if it has to be a quarterback. So let's trade him. And no, that's actually worse too. Okay, we've already used our post-June 1st designation, so we can't use it again. Okay, well, you can't do it with Denzel Ward or Jack Conklin. Joel Bitonio, well, he's getting up there in age. This is so doable, James. Yeah, okay.
When I heard that Derek Carr said that he'd be willing to renegotiate his deal to make it more team-friendly to help out with the cap in New Orleans, I was aghast. I was like, you realize the cap absolutely has never mattered in New Orleans. That's famously. Why would... what are you doing? Don't!
That's not the operating. That's not the thing that matters here.
No,
Goodness.
that is the opposite. If in fact they should be giving you more once they get rid of Taysom Hill. Like, and it's there's no way Taysom goes anywhere else but Denver next year, right?
Yeah, I can't. It has to be. It's the one guy.
Yeah, the one guy who like who got him the deal. Like, ridiculous. Let's go to Deez, who asks, considering Rodgers' lack of ability to shut the hell up, do you look at his former lovers more harshly or fondly, considering they made the decision to put up with his nonsense for as long as they did?
That's an interesting way to frame that. I guess I don't think you are necessarily accountable for your partner's behavior or anything like that, but I do think it is like suspicious if your partner is a bad person and you're comfortable with that and you're not being like coerced into the relationship. Like I guess we do know that Eva Braun was a Nazi. Maybe that's not a fair example. Well, I was just thinking, who's the worst person? Did they have a partner?
I wasn't expecting Godwin's law to be invoked so early in this question.
Well, I was just like, but here we are. From like a moral philosophy standpoint, if you use an extreme, it helps clarify the point, is what I was saying. And unfortunately, Eva Braun is not a very clean example of this one because she did knowingly participate in Nazi activities. But let's say, she was like, I'm not into politics. I don't know what that's all about. Yeah. We would still judge her pretty harshly, I think, historically, right?
This is a hell of a hypothetical.
I'm not saying that Shailene Woodley...
The bride of Augusto Pinochet clearly should have done more. We will judge her harshly.
It's not that she has an obligation. It's just that, like, I am concerned about what your values are because values are important in a relationship is what I'm getting at, right? Like, you don't tend to be in relationship with people who don't align with your values unless the areas you conflict are fairly low stakes for you, right? And if those areas where they conflict, if the low stakes value is, are people's lives important, then that's a different problem, but still a problem, right? Ethically.
I mean, I've dated some at least one terrible human being. So,
right, and you ended that relationship. Well, okay, the relationship ended.
One could argue, yes. I don't know where to go with this anymore.
I'm just saying that it's like one element of consideration, right? You're not accountable for your partner's behavior, but it is a concern if their behavior isn't a concern. Okay, that's one. But two, patience is a virtue. And if you're willing to put up with someone being obnoxious, for like very obnoxious in ways that you consider low stakes, like a lot of people think that being a conspiracy theorist is like a pretty low stakes kind of quirky thing. And
it can be. It can be very funny on a first date.
Right.
Birds aren't real.
Birds aren't real. And I hold this belief sincerely. It's not a joke. But yeah, it can be like, I think a lot of people hold that opinion that like, oh, it's just his thing. It's a conspiracy thing. Don't got to worry about it. And while I disagree, I think the majority opinion is that it's mostly harmless, right? And so if you're in a spot where you're like, hey, my husband or boyfriend who has this insanely enormous platform is on national television every Sunday for 17 or 18 weeks of the year or whatever, right? And at the time, you didn't know he was going to have a weekly podcast, but could at any moment be on a weekly podcast and spout his views. You don't like think about like, hey, he's eroding trust in like institutions that don't really need their trust eroded, or at least shouldn't have their trust eroded in precisely that way. You don't think about it like that. You're just like, he doesn't trust Big Pharma. Who among us does, right? Like it's like a shady industry, right? So, the patience for him being obnoxious and arrogant, like that's interesting and maybe a good way to put it. But I don't know that I'm going to view them necessarily in a different light because it's very clear that he's kind of difficult to get along with. And they did evidently get along with him for some amount of time, right? I don't know that they get that credit, but I get where you're coming from.
Well,
I maybe shouldn't have used the Ava Braun example, but it's just kind of.
That's just where you're at.
Look, the second example I had was like Kellyanne Conway, right? Because her husband's like an anti-Trump Democrat, okay, and that's just weird, right? Like that's so weird, and like it's not even like they care, but they both care a lot.
I just assumed you were doing the Ava Braun thing because you've been so into the idea of going to Germany. Although now this raises a lot of questions.
I like Germany. That's not a Nazi thing. Germany is filled with a lot of people who are not Nazis, who are wonderful people and have a fascinating culture.
For the record, I'm not calling you a Nazi. I'm just this raises.
You're just
questions.
saying you're suspicious. Okay, yeah, I get where your wink nods are going.
I'm not winking and nodding. I'm saying this raises questions based on.
Look, which questions? Be clear. Be specific. What are the questions, James?
You know what? Tankby has a question for you. For the Arif Hassan Correction Corner. Ooh. You recently stated that pre-workout made you feel different, despite being a lower amount of caffeine than you normally consume, due to a lack of vitamin B, taurine, and the presence of protein. However, pre-workout tends to contain no protein, but does contain taurine and either vitamin B or a proprietary complex meant to act similar to the focus vitamin B in larger doses tends to provide. Likely the reason it felt odd to you was the presence of beta-alanine, which can cause a tingling sensation. On the list of misinformation you provided, where does this rank if you were to rank them from most damaging to least? Last episode, Arif was complaining that he did not have a Celsius and instead just had a thing of a pre-workout to drink, which then caused him to feel a little funny during the episode.
Yeah, I felt like I was flying during that episode. Like I was speaking quicker than I normally do, and I tend to speak pretty quickly. Okay, so my roommate had kind of a similar comment because he's the one that gave it to me and he listens to the podcast. And he actually did not suggest that there was vitamin B in the pre-workout. I could resolve this and just look it up. I'm not going to do that because it's very funny this way. But he did say it doesn't contain protein, but it does contain creatine and amino acids. And I know that amino acids are not proteins. I know that you have to combine them in certain ways for them to act like proteins or whatever, right? But I know proteins are made of amino acids, so that felt like a stupid distinction to me. But it didn't have a lot of the mood boosters that I typically have with Celsius, which include the vitamin B complex, which he didn't defend by saying it had vitamin B in it. So I'm going to take his word, or rather his silence on this issue, as fact and say this specific pre-workout did not have that particular group of vitamin Bs, the thiamine and niacin and all that. And I'm going to suggest that that was the reason that it felt different. And maybe there were some other compounds in there that were designed to get me to move. And I wasn't moving. I was podcasting. And that's why it felt weird and different. But yeah, I should have accounted for the fact that like there's a lot of people in the Discord that like lift. Because yeah, sure, why not? I'm sorry I mischaracterized your pre-workout by talking about my experience with my pre-workout, which is a different one, I guess.
Yeah. Pessimistic Minnesota sports fan asks, for the Norse code depression corner, boy.
This is a good one to follow the pre-workout corner. Yeah, that makes sense.
The end of the season has got me feeling really sad. Can anyone recommend me a way to help me process these emotions? Perhaps a playlist to help me feel what real sadness is like, to help me realize that the way the season is ending is not really all that bad in the big picture. I don't know, Arif, do you know anyone with a playlist like that?
No.
Oh, good. Patrick asks, for Arif's beekeeping corner, how can the Vikings use a, quote, swarm charm spell to optimize the upcoming draft and maximize the salary cap for re-signing and both re-signing and getting the attractive, valuable free agents?
Okay, so when I looked up swarm charm, first of all, it was in quotes. The reason I looked this up was because, like, am I missing a reference here? Like, why is swarm charm in quotes in the question? Is there like some thing in beekeeping where like that's a phrase that people use, or is this a meme on SportsTwitter? So I just Googled swarm charm. One of the first results was for literally a spell. from Atlas Obscura, the magic spells that herded medieval bees. And I feel like you're trying to combine corners, and I don't appreciate it because I didn't see this anywhere else. But for the purposes of elucidation, I will read out portions of this article. If you had a problem in early medieval Europe, chances were good that there was a spell for it. Metrical charms were sets of magical instructions for addressing dilemmas with spoken words and actions that combine herbal medicine, prayer, and ritual. Now, again, we have not reopened the magic corner. No more magic questions. I don't want them. In the margins of an 11th century manuscript for a swarm of bees, that's the name of the manuscript, is believed to be older, from the 9th century. It's one of the earliest examples of a subset of metrical charms called swarm charms. These were magical spells once used by beekeepers across Europe to control and direct their precious honeybees and prevent them from flying off when they gathered into a swarm. For a swarm of bees begins with the physical instructions and ends with what you should say to the bees. Take some earth, throw it with your right hand under your right foot, and say, I catch it underfoot, I have found it. Lo, earth has power against all and every being, and against malice, and against mindlessness, and against the mighty tongue of man. And then throw dust over the bees when they swarm, and say, sit you victory women. This is what it says. Settle to earth. Never must you fly wild to the wood. Be you as mindful of my welfare as each man is of his food and home. Did they know that like the worker bees were female? Like that's sit you victory women. That's it's crazy.
I don't know, but it seems like good advice for everyone, quite frankly.
Well, no, I was thinking of ants. Actually, all the worker bees are male. There's like one female, right? Like that's how bees work. Hold on.
I know the
we
staple.
Figure out the sex of bees. Okay, the worker bees are. I was right initially. The worker bees are female. Okay, so did they know in medieval Europe? That's crazy.
You googling the gender of the bee?
Wait, we don't know how they identify. It's the sex.
Yes, but
well, I guess the gender role they're occupying is also female. Yes. Okay. The bees are addressed as victory women because this term was also used for. I'm glad that the first paragraph addresses my question, because this term was also used for Valkyries and warrior women, and like them, worker bees are females. So they did know. Okay, but that's cool that they had science back then. I don't know why they combined it with magic, but
because that was science.
I know.
let's end this episode with a bit of an update from last week. Cody
the updates are always bad. I hate the mailbag so much.
Cody was asking how he could best incorporate Norse code things into his student teaching, and if there was something he could bring to the class. And we suggested a particular item, and it may have gone awry. Cody asks for Arif's advice corner. After listening to the last Norse code episode, I promptly took James and Arif's advice and brought a tub of Jif's peanut butter to the school I'm student teaching at. Upon entering the school, I opened the
peanut butter.
It's Jif. Don't do this. I'm not going to stand for this nonsense. No. Upon entering the school, back to the question, I opened the jar of peanut butter, walked around the hallway, and did my best to make sure every student I came in contact with got in contact with the peanut butter. Hours later, administration called me into the office to let me know that due to my transgressions, 15 students with peanut allergies were sent to the nearest hospital to be treated with symptoms related to their allergies. I was then asked to leave the premises and was swiftly kicked out of my university's teaching program. What did I do wrong? And why wasn't saying James and Arif told me to do it a valid enough excuse to reprieve me of my wrongdoings? Should I stop taking your advice, as it has only made my life worse? There are certain people who have taken our advice in the past, like Don from Ohio, and he's never been better. I haven't heard from him in weeks.
Which is only a good sign. I just want to make it clear, on the advice portion of our podcast, you should never take our advice. That's really important. That when we give advice, it comes to the condition that it's bad advice.
Yeah,
that you shouldn't take it.
The one time that it mattered, or say the one time it mattered, the one time that we did the real research on it was about Christmas trees and whether you should water them. And we got an expert.
I was so in. Well, first of all, that's because a non-listener asked the question. She was asking in earnest. Yeah. So that's first. And second, it was so absurd I had to respond. We got an expert, but like I was just like, there's no way. And I responded out of instinct, and then I looked it up, and then an expert corroborated the expert that I looked up. So it's, it's all okay. So first of all, here's a quote that people pretend is real, and I guess technically now makes it real, but it is now unattributed. But it was made up initially, and so when people make up a quote and it's historical, people assume that because the quote was attributed to a famous figure, it's correct. Anyway, soft times create weak men.
Really?
I'm just saying you're hardening up the population of the school by eliminating the ones allergic to one of the best sources of protein you could possibly have after taking a pre-workout.
I hate you so much. You'll understand in a moment why. I cannot. That is amazing. That is impressive. Why has your life gone so poorly? You clearly haven't experienced enough peanut butter, quite frankly. I would try harder.
What probably happened is that you didn't give the administrators the peanut butter either. Is you shared the peanut butter with everybody. The administrator calls you in and says, "Hey, 15 peanut allergies." That was a test, and you failed. You didn't open the jar of peanut butter up again and give it to all of the administrators.
See, that's the thing. You have to bring enough for the rest of the class. That's how that works.
Yeah.
Sam's Club container, call it good.
Okay, so you said that you were kicked out of the university's teaching program. Again, a test. Walk back into the university and go into whoever administrates the teaching program. And what should you have in your hand? That's right, a new jar of peanut butter.
Yep, and treat it like you were never fired. Just do the George Costanza thing.
Yeah. Make sure they didn't fix the glitch in payroll, though. That's important.
That is quite important. And with that bit of nonsense, that is the end of this episode of Norse Code. Arif, let's just kind of go over what you have to plug.
So there's, like I said, I'm going to be pretty busy this week. I can't really explain why, but that'll be clear in a little bit after I'm done. But I've got a recap of the Vikings game where I just kind of talked about my thoughts on the game as it relates to the end of the Viking season. That's up over at the Wide Left Substack. I've also got my pick for MVP, Defensive Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Offensive Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, Assistant Coach of the Year, as well as the First Team All-Pro, Second Team All-Pro, and a Rookie All-Pro team over at the Wide Left Substack. It took a long time to get together. I'm really happy with it. Of course, because it's a newsletter, a version goes out into everybody's emails. And if I have to make any edits afterwards, that doesn't get emailed out or corrected in the emails people have already distributed in their inbox. And of course, I forgot to fill in the offensive lineman for the rookie team, which now on the website, it's live. So that's been fixed. But, if you got an email that called Trent Williams the left tackle rookie of the year, that's wrong. I want you to understand that your instincts that Joe Thuney is not a rookie are correct. He's not. But at the website, that's all fixed. So head over there at wideleftpost.substack.com. Check that out. We've got a piece from Luke Braun coming in about quarterbacks and mechanics. That'll be kind of fun to break down. Who knows what the rest of the week holds? Who's to say?
I'm just saying that your editor should be fired for something like that. That's a hell of a mistake.
Yeah, I'll run it up the flagpole.
Yeah, well, good. So for Arif, look, I don't know how to tell you this, Arif, but as I was recently made aware, soft times make weak men. So that's where we're at. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to maybe just put that in a garage next time. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher,
Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan. And he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.